to become aware of the importance of the electrical side of life. Like what's the difference between going into a cathedral in some, remote place or a temple up on a mountain and feeling an atmosphere? What's needed for that atmosphere to be in your own home? This is it.
This is a place called Resilience Podcast. And I'm here with my friend and co-host, Emmy Schelling. Emmy, welcome.
Thank you.
And today we have a special guest. Joining us from Salvador in Brazil is our good friend, Colin Spenley. Colin, welcome.
Thank you, Martin. Hello, Emmy.
Hi, Colin.
If you're joining us for the first time, A Place Called Resilience podcast is a research into the quality of resilience. What is it? How does it aid us in our personal growth and development journey? How do we find it? Where do we look for it when we lose it? This is an exploration, and today we'll be going on a journey with Colin to discover his relationship with resilience. So, Colin, what part has resilience played in your personal growth and development journey?
I'm glad you got me thinking about it a couple of weeks ago when you invited me to the podcast. Because if you ask me right now, fresh for the first time, I think like most people, you'd have to really stop and think about it for some time. Maybe an immediate answer would pop out, but it's not a question we ask ourselves. It's not something I'd really thought about until the subject came up. And yet, when you think about it, it's like it's so important, it's so vital, it's so rich. It has been there, almost like an unseen friend, helping you survive and along the way. But I hadn't really stopped and thought about it. And I think one of the reasons for that is that in the contemplation about resilience and the part of my life, I see that when I've been excited about something, passionate about something, curious even about something, it produces resilience. When I felt purpose about something, when I felt in service to something, it produces resilience. So it's one of those, it's a really unusual quality because it's not often something you put first, but it comes alongside something else, some other purpose, some other direction. I was thinking about passion, something that you love, you can go for hours doing. My good friend Gary was on the podcast a couple of weeks ago and he talked about working the wall, trying to resolve this puzzle with the wall. If you don't really like something, if it doesn't really catch you, it's hard to have a passion about it. And therefore, from the outside, you think, oh, the person has such a resilience. They're going for years or hours or whatever it is on that thing. But once an idea gets in your head and you've got a passion for it and a feeling for it, it's amazing how the resilience comes. But it's almost like not as a first principle, as an accompanying facility or something. So, I really don't have a lot of clear answers about it. I'm on the research trail of it, like yourselves. So I'll give an example, just a small life example. Silly example, but a friend and I, when I was just before just about 18 years old, just when we were still kind of goofing around, trying things out and experimenting with different things. We had this crazy idea, let's walk to the end of New Zealand and buy what was called a pinky bar. It's a type of chocolate bar at the time. So completely bland, silly purpose. But we looked at each other and said, yes, let's do that. Something about the silliness of the purpose inspired us. We grabbed a few things and we started, and we walked, a kind of mix of hitchhiking and walking to the tip of New Zealand. And the last stretch, if you look at the map, it's like this long kind of pointy bit, and it's really just like this. It's like a peninsula that just extends out with one main road going along it. We thought we'd get a ride, but we didn't get any rides. We were walking in the rain, in the clouds. But because we had this idea in our head, it was an adventure. And somebody looking from the outside might call it resilience, but the resilience came because we were full into a purpose, a passion. Yeah, I see that connection between purpose, even if it's a silly purpose, it can suddenly create a kind of resilience.
How did resilience come? How did you recognize it?
Well, we were exhausted. We'd come over the top of a hill, thinking we must be getting there now. We knew there was a lighthouse at the end, so we're going to come over the hill. We're going to see the lighthouse. But when we would see the road stretching off into the distance, we were already soaked. We were literally walking in clouds sometimes because the clouds became low hanging. We were walking through rain clouds. And definitely you get that weakening moment of there's an imminent collapse coming, but definitely another ingredient of resilience is there's no way out. There's no, I don't have any other option. And so we looked at each other and thought, okay, this is it. A car came past. We're waving like two madmen wet on the road. That's probably why they didn't stop. Speed up, honey. There's two madmen on the road. But coming over that curve at the end and seeing the lighthouse and knocking on the lighthouse keeper's door, and he opens it up, we're soaking, saying, do you sell pinky bars? And he said, no. But come in for some hot soup. And of course, that soup was the most delicious soup I've ever tasted or ever had. So resilience was definitely in there to get through that particular phase, that particular mini journey.
Before you told us the story of the walk to the end of New Zealand in search of the Pinky Bar, you framed resilience as in, when I am in service, when I've been in service to something, resilience follows. When there is a sense of purpose, resilience follows.
Yes.
So are you intimating that's a pattern throughout your life in which you recognize the presence of resilience against a purpose, against being in service, or against something bigger, greater, higher, or of that nature, resilience follows?
Well, like the Pinky Bar story, that was quite a futile purpose. So it's not always a high, deep purpose. Hopefully that comes later. But in the contemplation of the resilience, I found myself thinking about how you don't have much. You have some, but you don't have much. And I found myself thinking when you're young, as you're growing, baby, toddler. And I found myself thinking about the word hood, which used to be a standalone word, but now it's just a suffix. Parenthood, motherhood, fatherhood, brotherhood, sisterhood. And we get a feeling when you hear that word. And of course, the hood that we didn't have on our Pinky Bar trip would have been nice. But the idea of a cover and a motherhood and a fatherhood, they extend that hood. They extend that Some countries, the bonnet of a car is also funny. Bonnet, like bonnet, is also a hood of the car, right? The engine. So it's a kind of cover or protection. And it's like the resilience of the mother or father gives that protection initially. So contemplating resilience, I think it's like honorable to recognize that it didn't have much. It's been built over time, and it comes over time as well, just naturally by life. But then there's resilience built. But then you have something like the neighborhood, which it conditions you. And it's funny looking at where that word derives from. It comes down to a very ancient word relating to shining and bright. And it made me think about how a hood allows something to stay bright and shiny. And I was very lucky when I grew up. I was in New Zealand in the 1970s. Lovely. Um, Big backyard, big front yard, a lot of grass in the backyard, just past the backyard, big grassy field, and then a forest. So I was in a kind of hood. The word hood today has been associated with like, boys in the hood and like rough area of town sometimes, but that was a lovely neighborhood. Not that you realize it at the time, but you're protected somehow, and you're growing up inside that until the point when you've developed your own resilience and resistances, and then you want to get past it, don't you? You want to go out and explore. It's now inside you, but the place of that cover is really fascinates me. Really interesting. And so the reason why the hood or the mini resiliences develop, like I remember as a boy getting excited about building a tree hut or, going hunting for something in the forest, go hunting for a imaginary enemy in the forest, and you get into the state of resilience. I think there's all types of mini purposes we adopt that produce resilience. Hopefully along the way, the purposes get more real and more to do with real service. And you get those people that go to difficult places, stories like Francisco, St. Francis, obviously, he went into leper colonies, and somebody else looking think, how can he do that? But he was touched by the motive of service. He didn't think of resilience himself, but from the outside, we can see there was an incredible resilience there. But it was driven or produced, maybe you could say, by the purpose. So along the way of my life, I've honed that purpose to what I consider my life purpose, and it produces a resilience.
Well, Colin, I was really inspired by your story about the Pinky Bar, and it reminded me of the role of humor, because just the fact of your intention to buy the Pinky Bar at the end of New Zealand, it can light you up and make you feel very joyful and function as a motor to give you, and it gives you fuel to go far. And so the strength of humor that can be a source of inspiration and energy on the way, wherever you intend to go. That was one thing.
Yes.
The cover, resilience as a cover. I know the experience that you know you have been tested on something, and it strengthens your tools of survival and your tools of dealing with what you will encounter. Maybe resilience comes from knowing and having experience, being tested on your journey to know what you're made of and what you are not with what you haven't gathered yet, but to meet your own strengths and weaknesses. And it comes across very natural how you describe it, that you want to escape the cover and meet new circumstances, and maybe even put your aims and purposes a little higher and further away, and find out what you still need to learn on the way to your new purpose.
Yeah, great reflections. Again, I don't think we often think of that. Maybe certain types of training we know of to build resilience. But it's interesting, the word resilience, and in Portuguese or in English too, you can see the letters RE are to do with regarding, either two things, either something to do with repetition or regarding something. If you look at the rest of the word, it anagrams the I silent or silent I. And that's why I love this podcast, because it's like we're talking about something that's normally silent. It's like people have it in them. It's a silent I. But it's not often talked about. How did you get through that? How did you get through that? You know, single mother gets through that whole difficult process of having the baby, raising the baby, all the worries. And people get through these phases and there's a resilience, but it's a kind of silent feature. And so it's great to stop and talk about it. But you mentioned humor too, and I think that is definitely because there's the resilient and there's like miserable resilience and there's like buoyant resilience, isn't there? Like I got through it, but I'm devastated, or I got through it and I'm feeling buoyant. I'm ready for more. And there's two different states you can, and I think humor can make the difference, and attitude and perspective of it can make a difference.
So how does service relate to resilience in your life?
I was always very curious about there's a connection with service and passion, of course, because you wouldn't be in service to something you don't agree to and have a passion about. I would say before service, I already had a passion about things outside the box. You know, the things that go, when you're a kid, it's things that go bump in the night and stories of vampires and the supernatural and ghosts. And me and my older brother would talk, the lights would be off, but we were talking to the night about all the weird mysteries. He had a friend who would feed him sort of weird ideas like, oh, there's only 5 people on the planet who know the truth of what's going on. And at night when the lights were off, he would tell me these stories. A friend of his called Jeremy Moffat. And I was always waiting. Jeremy Moffat said, there's only 5 people on the planet who knows what's going on, who know what's going on. And you know, I went to an aura class when I was like only 13, trying to see the aura, and I was very interested in this. What's outside what we're being presented? Energies, auras, atmospheres. Had a lot of small experiences of astral travel growing up, until the age of 15 in this one house in New Zealand. And I remember finally getting a book on. My mum left on the table. She had borrowed it. She never ended up reading it. It was a book called The Wisdom of the Mystic Masters. It was a Rosicrucian book. And I avidly read this book. I'm only 13, but I felt like I was reading things that it was like my language. There's the aura, there's astral travel, there's telepathy, I got so excited that I went to the first people I met in the next couple of days saying, let's talk about astral travel. Let's talk about the aura and these blank faces. It was the start of a certain line of resistance or resilience, for some of the words, because you realize other people are not interested in the same thing, but it's not going to diminish I didn't even have to consciously think it. It was just, there's no way this reaction has anything to do with what I know. You know, it's like being part of a secret club when you're a boy. You just you don't care if other people are in it or not. I'm on the thread of this thing, and that's all that matters. Later on, I started understanding the relevance of the electrical worlds, the aura and atmospheres to our mental state, to our emotional state, to our uh, the state of relationships, well-being. So this became a part of a bigger purpose, a bigger service, which I feel is before the human race, which is to evolve into an awareness of this realm. We don't need to know everything about everything, but the state of our electrics, the state of our mind, the state of the atmosphere in our house has a lot more impact than people generally realize. And we know it's generally because people don't much talk about it much. So along the way, I've developed a greater and greater passion, greater awareness, and it's become part of my purpose is sort of helping people get steps into that if they're at the doorway of that and they would like to find out more, how to go into that area safely and with common sense and some things they can practice and that type of thing. Because unfortunately, people get to that zone and there's a lot of wild ideas, crazy ideas, a lot of upside down things. And I think there is a way into that realm safely and with common sense and still keeping your feet on the ground despite the nature of the subject. So that might sort of, I don't know if that makes sense, but it evolved from a fascination into a service that I do see this as something that's a missing element of the human condition. And everybody knows the word now, aura. If you put aura into Google, you may get 10,000 pages. But the living reality of it and the living reality of taking care of the atmosphere in your home and how going into a certain location might affect your electrical state, and then how that affects your next interaction with somebody you love. All these nuances I find vital, fascinating, and I feel like it's the frontier of a new phase of human evolution.
Great response. You said something about electrical state. What did you mean by that?
Well, no, I use the term electrical state in the sense of the condition of that electrical field, our aura. If you say aura, people think mystical. If you say electromagnetic field, it sounds scientific and gets a nod, right? So let's call it the electromagnetic field. Just like there were solar flares recently, and nobody blinks when they say, oh, it's affecting the electromagnetic field of the Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows there's an electromagnetic field. We have one too. And it comes into the study of resilience because our skin has a resistance and resilience to external influences. This electromagnetic field too. But the other extension, well, there's really three. There's the immediate one around the head, like there's an aura within the aura. So we have an electromagnetic field around the head. You feel it sometimes if you're sitting near somebody and you sort of can feel this buzz. And I think it is in talk these days, people talk about the vibe of that person and the buzz of that place. People do sense it, but it hasn't really come into dialogue yet. And then there's the aura around the body, and then there's the aura of your house. And we only feel it really when we go distinctly into places that have a distinct atmosphere. I took a couple of groups to Peru, our neighbor here in Brazil, some years ago, and that's a resilience going up those mountains. We're going to talk about resilience, climbing those mountains in Peru, Machu Picchu and the like. But you go into certain places and there's a distinct atmosphere, and you think there's something about this place. People say things like that, like, there's something about that place. But I think the bit that's missing that I'm trying to champion in my life and I feel is important is that everywhere has an atmosphere. It's just that you felt it distinctly there. Sometimes down the other end of the bar, people avoid a certain um, area of town or certain places because they feel the heavy atmosphere and they just don't like even the idea of going to a certain place. And that's true. It's not just kooky thought. There can be a residual energy pocket there, and it's best not to go into it because it can affect your magnetic field, and then it affects your mind and emotions and eventually physical health as well. So
Yeah.
I think are we still on the subject of resilience, Martin? I think we are, because I think there can be a strong protective field and there can be a weakened one and a ruptured one even, that can make a person less resistant, have less resilience as they go about their life.
Trying to put together everything you've said so far, from St. Francis of Assisi, being able to go into leper colonies, and that's very striking imagery
Yeah,
because you think, well, what's happening there in relation to St. Francis, his purpose, motivation, and his ability to not be affected by that which he was trying to help, and what part did or does resilience play in aiding his immunity. So that's one very evocative image. The second evocative image is 13-year-old Colin picking up the Mystic Masters book left by his mother, because it also made me think, well, what part did your mother play in creating an environment that would allow you to pick up the Mystic Masters book and be very caught by that, and the part, just that moment in time in your life, and that the causative nature of that, as in you, the book, your mother, and your location, and how that catalyzed or fertilized or vitaminized lights in you that would open you up to this whole world of energy.
yeah,
Then you introduced us to the idea of the hood. And the feeling that went with that was cover, as in that which offers protection against that which you do not want to be affected by, like you're talking about with St. Francis. And then took us into, oh no, and then there were references to silence and service. And now you've left us really in the world of the energy fields and the part damaged energy fields can cause, or healthy, the vitaminization of healthy energy fields. So that's the journey we've been on. It's already very rich in imagery, story, and reference that is trying to give us an inroad into the character of resilience. But resilience, in the way you're portraying it, it doesn't begin with resilience.
yeah,
It's a consequence of, a result of, or not a result of certain things being at play. And you've brought us to the point of the health of one's energy fields and the part they might play in resilience. So in that assay, is there anything that comes up there that you want to return to fortify as we build this picture of resilience via your unique, assembly?
there are other threads too. I left New Zealand when I was 30 and traveled the world for a year. The problem, the curse and the blessing of New Zealand is it's so far away. It's a blessing because we kind of have our own little spot on the planet, and it's a blessing, and it's a curse because it's so far away. You've got to, if you're going to travel, the best way to do it really is to close everything up, which is what I did, and disappear into the world. So I left, and I went with an attitude of going where the winds of destiny will take me, and that's what happened. I would stay a few months here or a week there and pick up odd jobs, and I basically traveled the world until I arrived in Brazil. And there was such a special energy to Brazil. I thought, I'll stay here for a while. I'll stay here for a while. I was a little bit tired of the travel. And that was like 29 years ago or something. So I'm still here. But again, somebody might, I've mentioned this story to people and they go, oh, that's, how did you do that? It's tough or courageous or whatever, traveling the world like that. But it never crossed my mind at the time. And this is the interesting feature about resilience, this I silent again, the silent feature. If you love something, and I think St. Francis loved the human appearance as part of God's work, that he was able to do that. He didn't have a second thought about doing it. And I think if there's a passion and love driving, curiosity helps too. Then the resilience comes alongside. And but I think there are certain things that can build resilience that you may or may not be aware of when it's happening, like increasing versatility. When you come out of a place like New Zealand and you feel that it's the center of the world because it's the center of your world. And when you get out and about and you realize New Zealand's just this little spot on the map and every country feels that they are the center of the universe. And your kind of sense of perspective changes and you get a better perspective of things. And it builds a resilience because you don't have that fragile ego. If you can make the adaptation, you get the resilience of not having a fragile sense of self-identity. And that's a resilience in itself. Because the subject brings up the question, false resilience, like a pushy ego, for example, as opposed to humble resilience, a natural resilience that's not even given any thought. It's just there because of the nature of the person. So coming to Brazil and not speaking the language was very humbling. And if there's any time I can consciously say I needed resilience and persistence, it was learning Portuguese. Word of advice, anybody thinking of learning Portuguese, it's easier to die and reincarnate in Brazil to start from scratch and learn Portuguese here than arrive as an adult and try to study. As an example, I know it's a bit on the side, Martin and Emmy, I'm sorry, but the word love in English, okay, love, loves, loved, 3 forms of love. Grammatically in Portuguese, there's 52 variations of the word amor. So resilience to persist and learn the language was quite it's quite a journey because you think you're getting it and then somebody comes up to you, starts talking, and you don't understand a single word because they're just talking too fast or something, and you just might catch a few words. So it takes years. But that's like, again, resilience in terms of physicality, resilience mentally, resilience for certain sub-contexts of work or learning Portuguese. It's not necessarily high work. It was part of my life story, but it's different to persisting with a spiritual endeavor, which is to me really you need the others as part of a kind of package sustaining system. But to keep your passion and faith and overriding purpose alive and bright, this is the challenge, to not drop it or fall into despair or give up or be distracted by some other bright, shiny, promising thing, but to stick to your guns, as the old saying goes.
And what would be driving you in those moments of holding and sticking to your guns, as you say, and not being affected by the challenges and variances of being a New Zealander in Brazil, trying to learn Portuguese and 54 variants of saying love? How did you get through those moments? What's the driving force? What's the St. Francis of Assisi compelling influence that would keep you on track?
First, I wouldn't liken myself to Saint Francis of Assisi. That's not on the table. But I do love the discover. I think that a lot has been discovered. You know, we've gone to the depths of the oceans and the heights of the mountains, and I love the sense of adventure and discovery that perhaps I picked up in New Zealand, because we're a country of radical sports, as you know, and there's some kind of adventurous spirit that comes through in New Zealand. But I think it's a human thing too. We love to discover. We're here discovering together. And it causes a restlessness that you can enjoy. Like when I arrived in Salvador, for example, beautiful weather, beautiful beaches, people happy. I thought, is there going to be any interest in the spiritual realms? Is there much interest here? Because you can really satiate yourself with all these physical pleasures, you know, beautiful, wonderful food. But the novelty wears off shortly. At least for me, I always find myself shortly after back into the consideration of the electrical condition of things. And I think this is a human issue wherever you go on the planet. So it's not Brazil, it's anywhere. I think there's a challenge before us all to become aware of the importance of the electrical side of life. Like what's the difference between going into a cathedral in some, you know, remote place, or a temple up on a mountain, and feeling an atmosphere? What's needed for that atmosphere to be in your own home? This is a challenge for me. This is a discovery. What were the conditions that created that atmosphere on the mountain temple, and what's necessary to create something similar in your own house? I mean, in the East, of course, they had the feng shui, and in remote times and Celtic times, they would have geomancy and the whole sensitivity to the land. So much of all that's been lost. So much was conquered at the time and been lost somehow over time. And I do feel is the way ahead, whatever else we come to in terms of the mind and the emotions, part of the package for sure is a new appreciation of the importance of the electrical side of life. And we all know it, because you meet somebody, you get a sense, don't you? You get a feel, you feel something, you get an aftertaste. There was something about that person left me feeling good, or the opposite, you know, something about that person left me feeling creepy, or whatever it happens to be. But what is that? What is that thing? So that I get the feeling something's driving. I've always had the feeling something driving me in that way, to do with my own discovery. But I have a nature that if I find clean water, I immediately want to share it with other people. Hey, look, I found some clean water. I just can't not want to share that fact. The challenge is most people aren't really interested. They don't see it as an important thing. But it just adds a layer of challenge to the situation.
Yes, what you just shared with us, Colin, that you have a natural inclination to share your gems, your findings with other people. whilst meeting people that are not that interested sometimes, that tells me that you must have a great natural or gathered resilience. Otherwise, you wouldn't stay intact as you are. So how do you deal with that? How have you managed to stay generous, keeping curious, nourishing yourself with what?
You guys have great questions. It's prodding the subconscious, things we haven't thought about before. Because sometimes I say to myself, the secret of success is don't think about it. So I'm not sure I want to even think about sometimes things are just working well. I think if it's not broken, don't fix it. Don't think about it. But if I think about it, it comes really to a no choice, a question of no choice. If you have two glasses of water and you yourself have seen without being told, although you may have listened to others as well, that one glass is contaminated and the other glass is clean, you can't go back. You have to keep fighting for that clean water for yourself and you will want it for others because you'll know that they'll be better for it. And it is funny to think that at some time that's exactly what happened. I mean, nobody blinks today. Everybody buys bottled water, clean water, water filters, right? Good analogy. But they can't see, you can't see the contamination normally. So people don't generally drink out of the tap anymore, at least here in Brazil, because it's understood that it's contaminated, even though you can't see it. And I think that same perception and not acceptable anymore about our electrical condition is coming. Once you've felt your electrical state, your electromagnetic field clean, once you've detected that, or if I do certain activities in my house, the atmosphere becomes nice and clean. Something installs like a valve in the blood system that doesn't allow blood to go backwards. A valve closes and it's like, I'm not going back. This is going to be the standard now. Now you can't push that on other people, and you hope to bring people into the experience of that so that they know that if they take a little bit of care in those realms, they're also going to have another degree of well-being, emotional well-being, mental clarity. And then I think one of the situations that I became aware of in this area that really causes me to get more warrior-like about it is the scenario of, let's say, a nurse, and she's argued with her boyfriend. So her auric field is now cloudy, and this nurse is in the maternity ward, and she goes and picks up a newborn baby. Now, you can't blame the nurse because it's a kind of ignorance. She just doesn't know. She thinks she's left the boyfriend at home, but she's taken that cloud with her. Now she's picked up a newborn baby who doesn't have resilience. And her clouds are now going to permeate the aura of that child, which is very weak still. And the child's going to cry. And they're going to look for the usual reasons and what ways to calm the child. And I think a lot of people, well, before extending the idea, just that scenario puts a warrior spirit into me that this has to be understood. It should be, a maternity ward should be so clean. The women who are pregnant, in the past, they used to keep them away from the tribe, not because they were considered dirty, but to give them a quiet space, a beautiful space, so that whole period of pregnancy, they were in a clean atmosphere. I love those ideas, and I think this cannot be abandoned. This has to be the human future, if there is a future. It has to be part of it, these considerations. I think we still have a lot to learn from the East and a lot to learn from ancient peoples who knew about these things. But to get it into modern language and find a way of incorporating it today is a challenge. And yeah, I guess you could say it brings a resilience. But again, it's a consequence of a resolve.
You started somewhere in your run with no option. And then the words point of no return, because you've seen the water.
Yeah.
And maybe because of this, you have discovered this warrior spirit within yourself. And I think I can understand when you have registered the peaceful atmosphere in your home because of what you've introduced into it. You want it to be like that. You want it to stay like that. So maybe that's part of the service. And then not only to you in your own, but maybe also to your wish to have a clean maternity ward, as you were describing.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I wonder if you can help us understand a little bit more about the atmosphere in the home, which you've referenced 4 or 5 times now, and maybe help explain what exactly you're referring to and how you personally go about creating and or attracting an atmosphere in your home, with what aim in mind, and then what maintenance and what resultant in benefits to you, and what it is you choose to do and how you choose to live.
Yeah. I think I mentioned earlier a way to kind of feel it, first of all, for anybody who's watching, is to think about a time you've been to a place that you were struck by the atmosphere when you walked in. And then and you can think about a place, for example, that had a particularly something special about the atmosphere. And perhaps another time, think only briefly of a time that you went to go into somewhere, maybe a bar or a nightclub or something, and you just didn't like the atmosphere and you backed out. Or maybe it could even be somebody's house. The thing is, those are extreme moments. The perception revelation really is we are always in atmospheres, and all places have an atmosphere. It's just because it was a bit extreme. It's a bit like when you're in the water and a cold current passes by you, and you were reminded suddenly that you're in the water, but you were in the water the whole time. And I think one of the big evolutionary perception and sensing awareness that's coming for us all is that we're always in this energy fields where we're always in some type of atmosphere. Your home, of course, then becomes a big question mark. What's the state of the atmosphere in my home? And the atmosphere is generally a result, not only, but it's generally a result of the processes that have gone on there. So the person's generating in their aura, and there's a residual is left. So it's like you smoke in a room, and then the smoker leaves, but the smoke stays in the room. Now the next person comes in, and we had a term for it, didn't we? Passive smoker. And if you don't know about it and you haven't cleared the room of that smoke, now your clothes are smelling of smoke, your skin, and you didn't even smoke. It might have been you, but maybe you didn't even smoke, you just walked into it subsequently. Now, what happens if there was 1,000 people? This was one of the challenges going to Peru. There's a way to approach sacred places to avoid the mass-produced energy field of all the tourists. Because unless you approach in a special way, you're not going to get that originating signal that was left there. In fact, a lot of the energies original energies have dissipated or backed or retreated down into the earth. But for the home, for our own home, we're conditioning it by our processes, but then it's conditioning us. Because if you smoke, going back to the analogy, it produces something in the room, but then that smoke starts affecting you. So if I travel, for example, with my lady and we go to some bed and breakfast, the very first thing I'll do is clean the atmosphere, because I don't know if the people before us have been fighting, have been depressed, have been anxious. And if I don't clean that atmosphere, by osmosis, I'm going to bring it into my system. And the tricky bit is if I absorb the energy of depression from some atmosphere, for example, or anger or irritation, I'm going to translate it into my own imagery. I'm not going to see it, the origin of that energy. I'm just going to translate into my depressive life situation or whatever it happens to be. So at a practical level, there's ways to clear that energy that are very simple. I don't know if you want to go into that now, if that's part of the territory, but there are ways to clear it. The first thing I generally indicate is using bowls and incense, but they have to be used in the corners of the room because that's where static, let's say the smoke, static, stagnant energy tends to accumulate. So if you only ring a bell in the middle of the room, bells have been used around the world to dissipate static energy. A friend of mine actually saw a Japanese monk once in a shopping mall in Japan, ringing a bell and then stepping into the space, ringing it again, stepping into the space as he walked his way through the mall. I mean, it would take a long time to go shopping, right? But he's taking it that seriously. So a little silver sounding bell rung into the corners, open a window. There's a more specific technique to it, but just if somebody wants to do something immediately, get a little fine sounding bell, ring it around the house in the corners and in the middle of the room, and then pass some incense around the house. Don't just leave it burning on a stand, but walk from corner to corner and spread the incense around the room, because electrically it's not enough just to throw some incense out there. The ringing causes a clearing out. Otherwise, it's a bit like throwing disinfectant or perfume into the bathroom, but you haven't actually cleaned it. So I do that until today. I do it not because the atmosphere is unpleasant, but to refresh. I don't want to be living in yesterday's energies. So I refresh the atmosphere because I want to feel today's energies. The planet's in a new part of the universe. It's not the same. What day is today? Tuesday. It's not the same Tuesday as last week, right? And so it's a way to refresh. And most religions, Buddhists, Catholics, they would have bells to clear atmospheres. Another reason why they might have had bells on top of churches, not just to call the people, but to refresh the atmosphere.
Let me jump in.
You know, it starts off as, oh, if I clear the atmosphere and clear my aura, I can feel better. And that's fine. And I've had a lot of students over the years that come and get a few techniques and go, and years later they'll say, I still clean my aura every day. I still clean the atmosphere because I like the feeling. And that's fine. I'm happy that they've picked that up. But there's another level to it, which is if you make space, good things can occupy that space. Why do we have to go to a temple or sacred space to feel sacred things? You know, some countries, some religions, they will have a sacred spot inside the house. They have really reserve a spot. They have a little temple or shrine inside the house. And again, today, a lot of that stuff is just symbolic. It's been lost, the fact that if you can create spaces where a finer energy still will occupy that spot. So it's a little bit out of the what's generally conversed, but if I can tell the story as an example, one of the students here said that in the countryside where she lived when she grew up, her mother told her here in Brazil, her mother told her that once she, the mother, was with five other ladies, and one of the ladies was pregnant and quite well along, since the subject came up for pregnancy once already. And she said there was a moment everybody just went absolutely quiet, and they all saw a blue light come in the room. I can't remember where it came from, but they all saw it move around the wall, a blue ball. And then it came floating through the air and sat on the belly of the pregnant lady. And this lady shared it with me because she said, the only time I've ever heard anything, my mother told me that story. My mother was there. They all saw it. She said, the only time I've ever heard anything that made any connection to that story was when you told us about a certain type of fairy life, a certain type of planetary electrical life taking the form of a blue ball. And that if your atmosphere is clean, these things will come into your own house and you start feeling special magical feelings in your own home. You don't need to go to that magic forest. You don't need to go up the mountain to a temple. Your own home can become a temple, and your own being. We also, I don't think God needs temples. He needs human beings carrying what's in the temple. And she was so delighted because she had a direction to take, because she felt the preciousness of her mother's story. And now she had something she could do, which was to clear the atmosphere and put some things around in the house that remind you of special things. I mean, you do it, Martin. Look at the background. There's plants and special things and butterflies. I mean, he's well along the way. Well along the way, but it's conducive, that we're conducive. It brings magic into, it reminds you, it links you. And just like people have a cat or a budgie or a fish, I'm not saying those are necessarily a good idea to put those creatures into those encasements, but some things will come of their own account, fairies and atmospheres. And suddenly just being home is such a special thing. And the opposite is really happening today, where people are going out into the world, picking up a lot of low astral influence, coming home and dumping it into the house. And a lot of people are not comfortable at home anymore because their own house has become a bit of a dumping spot for low astral energy, and they don't realize it's happened, and they don't know how to get a relief from it. So this is a very precious subject. It's not the only subject, but it's a precious subject. Quite nice timing there, Emmy, because this light came shining through. It's like a hallelujah moment, all this light coming through on your in your house there. Very beautiful. Is that an angel appearing in the corner, or is it sunlight? Come on, you can tell us.
So at this stage in our conversation, it feels like you're opening up that resilience may well be the person plus, and plus in this instance indicates influence, atmosphere, qualities, powers that exist in the universe that we can attract, that can come to join us because we are coded to be able to embody qualities. So that's where I feel you've brought us in an understanding of resilience. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. Yeah, it's very true what you're saying, and I think it's life within life that adds that other layer of resilience and attracts those things. What I mean, life within life, it's loving what you do, and it's having worked out why you do what you do. So we all know what it's like. Most of us have been in hospital at one point or another, and you get the grumpy nurse, and you get the nurse that she loves what she does. She's thought it through. It's a purpose. It could even stretch to a religious thing. Uh, and it's so nice when she comes to the side of the bed and asks how you are. It's the same words, it's the same function, but there's another dimension to it. And I think it's working out why you do what you do. And um, it's realizing that when you pass to somebody, for example, a glass of water because they're thirsty, that the reason why you do that, you can say, well, it's because the person's thirsty. But you can go more deep spiritually. Even the angels cannot pick up that glass and hand it to the person. God can't pick it up and hand it to the person. So we have a part to play. So small, kindly acts and thoughts and having reasoned it through. Why do I do what I do? What's the reason why? And loving doing that, loving the fact that you can be part of that is creates an atmosphere which in itself has a resilience and which then attracts the things that you're speaking of, Martin. So what I'm saying is that we don't have to abandon everything and go to a mountain in Tibet. It's digging a little deeper into why we do what we do in simple acts and kindnesses and services and that can make the difference electrically and as well as a few little practical tips can help as well, but I think that's the more powerful element.
I feel that we have been on a special journey, and that it has reached deep lives in me. The journey is continuing. That's what I feel. And you have opened different windows where we can see how the worlds around us and the worlds in us can intermingle and make things better and cleaner with very practical suggestions of how to go about it. So I feel very inspired, and I hope our watchers will also feel these sparks of inspiration and promise and hope to make things a little better step by step. This is what I feel. You've introduced us into another world that maybe we know to an extent in our own lives, but that have also shown different ways of looking. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you both. It's been very special, and I love the space you've cleared to consider something important to all of us. This thread of resilience, and I wish anybody watching all resilience and that your passion for the good things grows. And I think a moment too to thank whatever gives us resilience, because there is something that gives it. and there's something that's built, but there's something that gives it. How many times you just almost feel like giving up, but something pops you back again. And they say that the origin of the word is to do with leaping. Um, and I love that. I love the fact that the idea that not only trudge on, but leap, finding what makes your spirit leap so that you can get that resilience back and not just go on, but go on brightly. So thank you, Martin and Emmy. Very special.
No, thank you, Colin, for really a very, very rich journey that began taking us to the edge of New Zealand in search of a pinky bar, that introduced us to 13-year-old Colin and discovering the Mystic Masters on this very evocative journey into the energy worlds, atmospheres, the practicality of cleaning one's home, on what it's possible to attract to oneself that is enhancing, enriching, vitaminizing, and fortifying, that may into itself be resilience providing. So I hope you've all enjoyed this edition of A Place Called Resilience podcast, and that Colin has shared one or two things that may aid you on your resilience journey. So Colin, thank you very, very much. It's been a real privilege.
Thanks.
You're
Bye for
welcome.
now.
Thank you, Colin. And don't forget, if you've enjoyed this, to like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll see you all next time on A Place Called Resilience podcast. Thank you, Emmy. Thank you, Colin.
Thank you.
See you soon.